introduction to material properties. In the training, some of you may have used the sample materials to wrap around any objects you have on your edit window. And this is done by picking up the material and dropping it onto the object. And you can see here in the scene tree how we have the material here. Now if I delete that, that'll delete that material. Now when we put the material on, that opened up the material properties window. The material properties window is a very powerful tool for creating material to wrap around the surface of any object. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new material. Be very careful when you're doing this because occasionally it will default to the scene material. The scene material provides all the default lighting for the scene. And if you modify this, let's add a colour and we make this red. Any object which we now add to the scene will also be red, and this is because we're lighting the whole scene with red light. So be very careful not to modify the scene material. If we click make new material, it'll make a new material with a new name. When you make a new material, by default it comes up with a diffuse white colour. To modify this colour, we can click in the colour box and that opens up our colour palette, and that allows us to choose the colour we want to use. We have red, green and blue values, YUV values, we have intensity here, and we have a colour palette at the bottom. So I'm now going to put this onto my box. I can either drop it here or I can drop it on the word box 1. This is a diffuse material. A diffuse material reflects the light. If I take my box, I go to the properties, if I rotate it around, as it disappears from the light, it goes almost black. A diffuse material reflects the light, and that's reflecting the default lights within the scene at the moment. Let's click on my material. Luminance, however, will actually transmit light like a television set. Let's go down to luminance and let's add a colour. Again, we'll choose the same bright green colour. You'll see at the moment how we've got diffuse and luminance both on the same object. If I reduce the intensity of the luminance, it becomes just diffuse again. And if I take off the diffuse, then that's the combination of diffuse and luminance. What we normally do is either have just diffuse or luminance. So I'm going to go to the diffuse layer and just delete that colour. This is a luminance colour, and that means it's giving off colour. And this is why we can hardly see the edges, because there's no lighting to show how the edges are formed. Every surface, because this is placed on the whole object, which is inherited by the front, back, left, right and top and bottom, every surface is now giving off light like a television set. Because it's giving off the coloured light, it doesn't matter if there's any lights in the scene. What I did is I deleted my diffuse colour. When you have a material on the surface, I'd advise to have something in diffuse or something in luminance, rather than just deleting one and having nothing active on a layer. I can uncheck luminance and I can uncheck diffuse there. Ideally, when you're building a material to use, if you're not going to use the luminance, instead of unchecking it, what you'll do is you'll actually just delete the elements in the luminance. With our diffuse surface, we have a colour there. If I click on the plus, it's possible to change the red, green and blue values of that colour by just modifying the RGB values here. Intensity, that's the percentage mix, goes from 0 to 100. You'll notice that when I go down to 0, it doesn't go see-through, it goes black. The reason it goes black is because the blend mode is set to opaque. Opaque means this is a solid object. So no colour will give you black. If I change this from an opaque material to a transparent material, as we change the percentage mix, then it will become more and more transparent. The little football here gives you an indication of how your material will respond in lighting. This window allows us to build up layers of elements, so I could add a gradient on top of our colour. If I click on the plus, the gradient at the moment is going from black white to black. If I change the white to a nice bright orangey yellow, I change the black to a nice strong red. There you are, a gradient from red to yellow. And you can add additional colours, so you can now make a three-way graduation, and you can just keep adding these colours to make a greater and greater graduation. And that's a graduation. On top of a graduation, I might add an image. What I'm going to do now is, if I go to my C drive, inside the Pixel Power folder and inside Stream Master, I will find my materials folder. And these are all the bits that we use to make these default materials on the left here in the material library. So if I go to resources, I can now see all the images that were used to make these default materials. Let's choose this brick image here. If I click open, that's now put the brick material on top. If I change the mix here, I can change the percentage of the brick to the graduation underneath, and I could also fade down the graduation if I wanted to. So you've got standard blending controls here. Talking about blending controls, in composition and paint software you often have different compositing modes. If I click the arrow to the right of normal, I can change this blending mode to something like darken. And now it's using the darker part of the image when combining it with gradient underneath.